Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the forum. I hope you're all doing great and in the best of your health. So, today we're going to talk about another interesting concept, like always. And this concept is useful for you in multiple situations. But especially if you're a leader or a manager in any organization, small, big, mid size, this is going to be a tool that you are going to love to use. So, let me promise you that at the outset. What is the tool exactly? The tool is called Skill and Will Matrix. The Skill and Will Matrix, and it's a beautiful tool that anybody can use. And as I said, especially if you're a leader, this will be a ace up your sleeve. Okay, so without any further break or any further ado, let's try and understand what is the skill will matrix all about and how to go about using it. Now, a couple of things which I would like to tell you, perhaps it might be useful if you keep a pen and paper handy because there are a lot of things going to come your way. So you might want to make a few notes. But apart from that, you have to try and use this tool right at the outset because it's best used when it's implemented. So once you implement it, it becomes a part and parcel of your leadership style, your managerial style, and therefore you can reap a lot of benefits out of this tool. So enough of talking, let's understand what is the tool exactly. So here's the skill and will matrix. And how is it defined? Well, there are many ways you can define it, but to just make things very simple, this is what the skill and will matrix is all about. It's a tool to evaluate performance of employees based on two very important parameters. One is the skill and the other is the will. Now, what is the skill and will? Now, what does that mean? So skill stands for competence of a particular person, the ability of a person to perform, the skill set that are required to perform at the corporate level. And then the will talks about the willingness, the motivation factor. So do you have the ability to perform, but at the same time, do you also want to perform? A lot of times people may or may not want to perform in spite of the fact that they have the skill set. So we will look at all the categories now, which will help us understand each of this in further depth. So skill and will talks about competence and the motivation or the wanting spirit of an employee or an individual to perform. Now, here are the four quadrants. So what are the four quadrants? Four quadrants basically stand for four sections here. And the first section that we're going to look at is called low skill and low will. Now, on one axis, you have skill and the other axis, you have the will. So both are covered here. So let's begin with low skill and low will. So typically, you have an employee whose skill sets are very, very low. And at the same time, the willingness to perform is also very low. Now, do you have employees like that in your team? Maybe, I'm not sure. You need to check for that. But it's important that you have conversation and you observe your team members so that you understand where do they stand in terms of their skill set and in terms of their willingness. Now, it may happen that sometimes people who join in your team might not have the skill set to perform because they've never been trained on it. And maybe they are kind of skeptical since they have joined the company. They are not sure if you're going to stay with this company for a long duration. So that might also adversely impact their willingness. So when you see that someone does not have the skill or the will, that is, they have got low skill and low will, the approach that you need to take as a leader is to direct them, is to tell them exactly what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, when it needs to be done, etc., etc. So your role as a leader is quite large in this particular context. So you're not only telling people, you're telling them everything in as much detail as possible. And that is why the role that you adopt here is called direct, because you're telling people exactly what to do. In a sense, you're asking them not to use too much of their own brain because they're fresh to the system. They might not have an idea. So you're going to direct them as much possible in this particular time frame. Now, while you're directing them, it's tantamount, it's similar to trying to teach someone how to ride a bicycle. So imagine you're trying to teach someone how to ride a bicycle. You have to first explain them the importance of balance. You get them on the bicycle. And now, just when they're about to paddle, you're holding the person and you're holding the bicycle and you have to run with them. So it's not going to be an easy task mentally and physically, of course, because it demands a lot of attention and involvement on your part to direct someone. But nonetheless, it's an important role that any leader has to perform. Next, on the left-hand side top, you see low skill, but high will. Now, what is low skill and high will? Now, here are typical people who are wanting to perform. They really want to make a difference. They want to contribute, but unfortunately, they do not have the skill set to do that. Imagine any person joining in fresh in your team who has worked beforehand. So, he wants to prove his or her mettle in the new organization, but he may not be aware about the way of doing things in this particular organization. So the skill sets required for your organization are not quite there. So what you need to do here is you need to guide, you need to provide guidance. And how do you do that? Provide some amount of autonomy or freedom, okay? But at the same time, you're observing minutely that this person is not doing anything terribly wrong. So you're controlling affairs, but at the same time, you provide some degree of freedom because the person is wanting to perform. But in the excitement to perform, a lot of people might commit mistakes. And that's why, as a leader, your job is to observe, stay there, and see that things are being done the right way. Going back to the bicycle example, in this particular case, you have made the person get on the bicycle. The person has now started to paddle, and you're standing at a distance and say, okay, you can take a few rounds, but I'll observe you. If you need help, get me in, rope me in. So you're guiding people and you're telling them that you're there to support them as and when they need you. So that's the second quadrant called guide. Now, the third quadrant is called excite. Now, it's an exciting quadrant. What does it talk about? So the excite quadrant talks about someone who has got high skill, but unfortunately, low will. Why would that ever happen, that someone who's got skill set is not feeling the willingness to contribute? Now, this can typically happen for multiple reasons, but one very pertinent reason is that I have performed in the past. I believe that I deserve increment. I believe I deserve promotion to come my way, but that hasn't happened. So that has disappointed me. And therefore, my willingness has taken a hit. Sometimes the business cycle in the organization might also impact people. For example, if people think that no matter how much skill I've got, even if I put in efforts, things are not going to change in the short term because the overall economic scenario is not really that great, not really that promising. So why should I put in more efforts? That also might hit the motivation levels and the willingness factor that you see here. Now, therefore, what should be your role? If you see people are not motivated, if you see people are less excited, then your job is to motivate them, is to excite them. How do you do that? Well, you need to first and foremost identify what is the reason for which people are not motivated. There must be something which is bothering them because of which people aren't motivated enough to perform. So identify that reason, and then accordingly, you got to get them excited. How do you get them excited? You need to find out factors which motivate them, which lift their spirits. And that's why having a one-to-one conversation here is absolutely critical. Remember, these people have the skill sets. They have performed initially. They know what they're doing. And therefore, you cannot let their spirits die. Very, very important. This is also an important section because a lot of times at this stage, if people are not given the confidence that they need to be given, then there is a possibility that they might quit the organization. So this is a very sensitive zone. It's therefore important for a leader to intervene in this particular case and make sure that you are getting your people excited and you want them to get back to the old ways of performance, right? So that's the excite section, the excite quadrant. Last but not the least, you have a quadrant which I believe is the dream quadrant, okay? Because you have someone here who is highly skilled. At the same time, this person has got high willingness factor as well. Now, what you do as a leader, not much for you to do, but you still have a role to play here. So you see someone who has got the ability to perform as well as the willingness to perform, then your job is to delegate. Your job is to give certain portion of your work, the responsibility along with the authority to a particular person who has the ability as well as the motivation to perform. Now, do you readily get people like that whom you can delegate? The answer is no. If you get someone, you're very, very lucky. You can thank your stars. But in most cases, it is the leadership that you bring to the table which allows people to become competent enough and skilled enough as well as willing enough to be in the delegate quadrant. So the delegate quadrant is something that you work towards. It doesn't happen all of a sudden, and it seldom happens through fortune or luck. So when you have people in this quadrant, give them all the support that you need. But in this particular case, you are pretty much set. These are also the people who will become part of your succession planning. So when you move into the next position, these are the people who will move into your role, and therefore that means that they will help you get promoted as well in some way or the other, because you are now relieved of the fact that someone else is taking care of your responsibility. So a very, very interesting section or a quadrant that you need to really look after. But as I said, you need to work towards it. It won't happen automatically. So these are the four quadrants that we have. We have direct, we have guide, excite, and delegate. Now, let's look at each of this in further depth so that we understand the approach that we need to take. So the approach for each of this quadrant, as I've already spoken about this, but let me give you some more insights as to what you need to do. So direct, as we all see, is a column where you have less skill, that is low skill, as well as low will. So what you do in this case, you need to provide as much direct instruction to people. You need to identify what motivates them. You need to identify what are their skill requirements, and accordingly, you need to direct them. This is also an important opportunity for you to look for quick wins, because that will help people get motivated and they will want to perform more. So quick wins are situations wherein if people do something nice, congratulate them, appreciate them, and that will also propel them to work more harder and perform. So direct approach is something which requires a lot of patience on your part, but nonetheless, it is a real test, an acid test of your leadership ability. Then you have the guide quadrant, where you see people have got low skill, but they have got high willingness. So these are people who want to perform. They want to showcase that they are there and they are going to contribute. So as much as possible, try to remove obstacles and barriers from their way. That is what your role as a leader would be. But at the same time, you need to provide them some kind of training, some kind of coaching. Maybe timely feedback would be a great way to tell them that, look, you are all pumped up, you're enthusiastic, but sometimes in your enthusiasm, you make these kind of mistakes. So why don't you watch out for this? Perhaps the next time when you do this rather than this, and that will make a huge difference. You get that? Now, that's the kind of feedback that can help you get these people to perform consistently. And as I said, give them some degree of freedom, not complete freedom, but some degree of freedom, because they believe that they want to perform. They don't need someone else to observe them. So guide them, but don't micromanage. And then third, we have the excite column. Now, these are people who are highly, highly skilled, but right now the situation is that their willingness has taken a hit for whatever reason. So first and foremost, the most critical thing to do here is to identify why is their motivation low. Sometimes it could be about increments, sometimes about promotion. Sometimes it could be also about that I'm going through a family problem and therefore my motivation levels are low right now. Or sometimes it could be the business cycle is not improving. There is a recessionary trend outside. So why should I put in more effort? So whatever the reason might be, identify that, which means you need to hit their intrinsic motivation. Look at what challenges them. What is it that excites them? And then provide mentorship. Also, this is a great opportunity for you to recognize their efforts. Seldom, when people perform, we don't recognize their efforts much. This is a beautiful opportunity for you to recognize their contribution in the past couple of years and remind them of what has worked for them. Sometimes you need to remind them that they are capable of doing something. So exciting people is really, really important so that they consistently perform. And then last but not the least, you have delegate. Now, these are people who are there for you, who have the willingness as well as the ability to perform. So high will as well as high skill. You need to give them trust. You need to tell them that, look, I trust you and I'm going to give you new responsibility and I want you to do a good job here. If you need my help, I'm there, which means you offer support, but at the same time, you offer them a lot of freedom so that they can work on their own. Okay. Now, freedom in terms of their approach, their way of doing things. So the worst thing you could do is to micromanage them. So step aside, give them responsibility, step aside, tell them if you need my help, rope me in. But I'm going to trust you completely because you have performed in the past. You have the ability as well as the motivation to perform. So I don't see any reason why you won't be successful. So that's where your role as a leader becomes very, very critical. So those are the four quadrants. I hope each of these quadrants is clearly understood by everyone here. Let's understand a few more details around how do we use this matrix. Now, all of these dynamics will work only when you knew how to use the matrix really well. So one very important thing in all the four cases is to have one-on-one discussion with people. Now, why is this discussion important? Because you need to tell people where they're lacking, or you need to tell people where they're doing good. And therefore, having an open one-to-one discussion with team members is important, so that you also get to know what should be the right kind of approach that you need to adopt. You need to direct, you need to excite, you need to guide, you need to delegate. You will get to know more about that. Also, in order to gauge the will and skill, you have to observe people as they're performing a task. So one-on-one discussions can be complemented with observation as well. Second very important factor is that be absolutely non-judgmental. Now, non-judgmental would only take place when you are looking at quantitative parameters or parameters which are objective. Now, what do I mean by that? So look at scoring sheets, look at performance evaluation scores in your organization, or look at the performance numbers of your people. Numbers are far more objective way of evaluating, especially the skill factor. Maybe willingness is something that you'll understand more when you observe people and talk to them. But try to be as objective as possible. Don't let your biases come into the way of a fair evaluation. Number 3, do not label your people. Now, although this tool helps you to categorize people, it's important that you don't end up discriminating people. Oh, you're not good enough. Oh, you're very good. You're amazing, but you're not that great. You're an average guy. Now, all of those are sentences and phrases that you definitely want to avoid as a leader. So do not label your people. The matrix is going to help you categorize and classify them, but it should never become even an unintentional discriminatory tool. That is not the objective. If it ends up becoming that, then perhaps it defeats the whole purpose of using the skill will matrix. And then last but not the least, you can't do this exercise only once in 2 years and then forget about it. It has to be done consistently. Typically once every 6 months, if you can spend some time using the matrix, looking at who is where in which quadrant and what can I do about it, I think that's a great way to go about using this particular tool. So this is how you use the matrix to its best utility. And then finally, the question is, why should I use it? Well, there are so many reasons, and I can give you hundreds of reasons why you should use this matrix. But first and foremost, the basic reason is it's an absolutely easy framework to practice. There is nothing complicated about it. You can apply this tool right away in your teams and get to know who stands in what quadrant and what should be your approach. So that's number one reason why you should even consider using the matrix. Number 2, and I think this is the most important thing, it helps you identify skill gaps in employees as well as your team members. This is a conversation where you also get to know what are the training needs or coaching requirements of the people in your team. What kind of skill sets are they lacking? And what can I do as a leader in terms of coaching, mentoring, training them so that they learn those skills? Similarly, you also get to understand what are the expectations that your employees have, and more importantly, what motivates them. Now, when you see people who are lacking in motivation, there are reasons why people lack motivation. So understand what motivates them. For some people, it could be challenging tasks. For some people, it could be recognition. For some people, it could be cash rewards. Identify what really triggers their motivation level and try to see if you can provide that at different intervals of time. And last but not the least, as I said, you get a lot of rich inputs in terms of what to train people on, what kind of skill sets do you need to look at, what should be your focus, your training need identification. All of that gets done quite easily when you apply the skill will matrix. So multiple reasons why you should use the matrix. I'm personally a big fan of using the skill will matrix, and you can use this not just in the corporate world, but even otherwise, wherever you are dealing with people who are part of your team, in order to look at their skill and will factors, you can definitely utilize and leverage the skill will matrix effectively. So what are you waiting for? Apply this tool, implement it right away in your teams and see how it benefits you. I'm sure it will benefit you a long way. And then, of course, if you have any further questions, I'll be more than happy and delighted to guide you on that. That's all from my side about the skill well matrix. Hope you enjoyed listening to this particular video, and it's going to give you some very rich insights that you can put into good effect. That's all from my side for the day. Thank you so much for listening in, and we'll meet again very soon with another video on another subject. Till then, please take care of yourself, and bye-bye for now.